Is that working? Can everyone see that? This is
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Yes.
This is our beautiful home that we are currently restoring. So why we're here, as Patrick stated, we're asking for design feedback for revised landscape plans. We have made further accommodations based on the Qing's concerns and the ADR suggestions that we received. We have moved the pool farther away from the common property line between 70 and 102 Ivy, where no variance is needed. We've increased the planting area by the shared fence from 3 to 4 feet and increased screening plants. We've reduced the scale of the pool and increased the distance from the front property line. Now it's 10 feet from the front property line and 15 feet from the paved road. We've added a raised planter with additional screen planting along the street frontage, and we've enlarged the water feature for white noise. Sorry, it's not letting me, there we go. Prior to the June 4th ADR meeting, we had talked to the Qings, heard their concerns, and made accommodations, including moving the pool out of the side setback and all of the pool equipment to the opposite side of the property. We do not need a variance for that side setback. During the June 4th meeting, there were 3 issues raised by the Qings. The first was they were concerned about tree removal due to the pool. We will state that we will replace any removed trees with another tree in another location on the property. They were concerned about damage to the road, and we will return the road to its original condition post-construction. And finally, they were opposed to a pool on the grounds of privacy noise. Further accommodations have been made and will be addressed together with the 3 ADR suggestions in the following pages. The first suggestion that we heard from the ADR team was to add pool noise mitigation for the neighbors at 102 Ivy. So in order to do this, we moved the pool 3 feet farther away from the side setback. The pool is now 8 feet away from the side setback, 23 feet from the property line at the closest point, and roughly 50 feet from 102 Ivy Drive's bedroom at the closest point. The Qings do have hardscape within their setback extending along our shared fence. We also increased the planting area between the fence from 3 to 4 feet and increased screening plants. We are also open to specifying larger and more mature plants. And finally, we enlarged the water feature to create more white noise. Concerns the Qings may have about noise from over the fence while sitting on their patio that is within their side setback are not relevant. Also regarding sound, we searched the published records and we could not find any records of Ross pool applicants who were asked to move their pool to the opposite side of the property or to build a sound wall. In fact, the Town of Ross design guidelines expressly state that ways to respect neighboring properties' privacy is to favor natural, semi-transparent landscape buffer, and impermeable barriers are disfavored. We did find 2 approved plans where neighbor noise concerns were addressed. The first was 45 Bolinas Avenue, and there were some concerns about pool noise. The applicant there was asked to add trees along the common property line between the project site and the neighbor. We also found 20 Lagunitas, and there the concern was about driveway noise, and the applicant was asked to provide a landscape buffer and screening along the property line, and also to consider pavers over gravel to reduce noise. Nothing super draconian. The second concern that we heard from the ADR team was that the pool was 4 feet from the road. The pool water was originally 7 feet from the front property line and 12 feet from the paved road. 4 feet was not correct. The pool is now 10 feet from the front property line and 15 feet from the paved road. We also added a raised planter with additional screen plantings along the street frontage. It's important to note that our front yard is elevated 4 feet above the road grade and is separated from any neighboring properties by the road and a parking berm that is owned by 70 and 100 Ivy Drive. There are no homes visible from the front of 70 Ivy Drive, as you can see here. Also, on paper, the pool looks closer to the road than it is in reality. The pool was staked, at least the previous plan was, for the ADR team to review in person, and I hope you had the opportunity to do so. Again, from the edge of the paved road, there is a soft shoulder of gravel and then a very thick hedge. So the paved road is actually 15 feet to the pool. The final concern that we heard from the ADR team was that the scale of the pool could be reduced to better fit the property. And we have done that. So we reduced the pool dimensions to 42 by 13 versus 46 by 16 original. So this further, keeps us out of setbacks and from encroaching. So this is the plan itself. And just to recap the accommodations from this round, we moved the pool farther away from the common property line. It's now 23 feet from the property line. We increased the planting area by the shared fence, reduced the scale of the pool, added a raised planter along the street frontage, and enlarged the water feature for white noise. And just to close, pools and pool noise are consistent with the neighborhood. And we are not trying for a variance. We're not asking for a variance in our side setback, although the Chings do enjoy a patio within their side setback. We have an appendix here also, which just has some of the research, which may be more relevant for town council, just in terms of precedents. But at this point, I can just hand it over to Brad in case there are questions. I think he's probably in a better position to answer the questions.
And just to clarify, is Brad the call-in?
Brad, are you there? Oh, I saw Lisa, maybe. That's the same last name.
Yeah, this is Brad. I got on Zoom and it was on my wife's and I didn't know how to get off of it. And I didn't want to exit. So, yeah, I'm mostly here to answer questions. I think Charlotte did a great job presenting what we had proposed as modifications. And I can answer any questions that anybody might have during this time.
Did you see or try to see what it would look like or work like to move the pool, to basically flip the location and move it closer to the garage and change the entrance to the house?
Well, the house stairs are existing, and then the front door is over on the left side of the wood deck. So we couldn't change the entry location of the stairs. It really needs to be where it is. And part of the idea is that we're replacing existing stairs that are outside of the property line. So we wanted to keep those, and there's some nice tree. There's a nice arbutus tree right in that area, and then the driveway. And, this was an attempt to have some sense of an entry to the front door without feeling like the pool is in the front yard. So there's the raised planter with the screen plants that screen the pool when someone comes over to go to the front door and they don't feel like they're staring at people in the pool. And then when you're at the front door, that the pool is not directly in the front of the house. So the other side, there's just not space. The fences are very much existing, very close to what I'm showing is existing. And there's an oak tree on that side, and there's the driveway and storage sheds and bigger drop-offs and retaining walls. And the only other place on the site that would make any sense for a pool would be in the side setback adjacent to the 102 Ivy Drive property.
Another question, what is their side setback on their house, the Chings?
I would assume it's 15 feet, probably just the same as this side setback.
I mean, no, what's the as built? How far is their house away from the property line?
Well, I got out Google Earth and I did my best, and I calculated about 50 feet from the closest water line to the closest wall of the Ching house. And we didn't go on their property and measure because I'm not allowed to do that. So that was the best that I could do. But I did scale it and spent some time on Google Earth trying to figure out exactly what that distance was. And it's around 50 feet.
Okay.
Just to clarify that, Brad, you said 50 feet between the proposed pool and their dwelling, not
Yeah,
necessarily the
their bedroom
property line,
wall.
right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So the property
Yeah.
line kind of falls about halfway there because you've got about 20, you've got about 23 feet from the water to the property line. If I
Yeah,
remember,
about
Charlotte,
that.
predict-
Yeah,
okay.
and, something like that. There used to be a water tower
Yeah.
a while ago in between these two properties, and then the water tower was removed. And I don't know all the history of it, but that land, I don't know, Charlotte, you may have.
Yeah, no, it's not about that. I just was trying to clarify for Joey. It looks like,
Right.
Call it 25.
Yeah, I just want to know, like,
Either
how
side.
far their house is away from the property line
I
on
think
their.
it's about 25 feet. It may not be, like our house isn't parallel to the property line. The property line's on a little bit of an angle.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if the Ching's house is on parallel to the property line or on an angle as well. We can probably get that off Google Earth. If
There's
we-
the Google Earth. I was just trying to say that there's a Google Earth shot in the appendix. If you click Charlotte 3 slides through, you can get a good sense of scale and distance here. Slide right there. So
yeah, so there's, yeah.
Okay.
And then there is the Chings have a patio right there within the setback. And we are not proposing a patio on our side. We're proposing what's allowed, and that's a lawn with screen planting.
Okay.
I don't have any other further questions, Mark.
Okay. Is there one picture you have, and you had this last time for us, and I just wondered if you could pull it up for a minute. It was basically this overlaid on the setbacks. The aerial
The
view.
plan, we didn't
Yeah.
update all the set because we updated this plan, and the dashed line is the setback. But there's another.
Okay, so the dash, okay, so it's the dash line. Okay.
It's the dash line, yeah.
Yeah. So this isn't a question, but it's just a comment. And this project's unusual because if there was an extra 15 feet of property below the pool towards where Ivy Drive is written on this plan, and if that was just dirt and part of their yard, it wouldn't even be a question because the pool would not be in any setbacks. And I think we'd all think it was fine here because it's not encroaching upon 102 Ivy Drive as the setbacks.
No, we're not encroaching on 102 at all. And we
Right.
never were.
Right. So it's a little bit unusual in that the house we're worried about, it's not too close to based on town setbacks. And if there was an extra 10 or 15 feet, I think in this case, 15 feet of yard instead of Ivy Drive being there, I don't even think it would be a question. I think we'd all think it was fine. The question.
Remember that
is-
Ivy Drive is a road, and it's also, there's a whole large parking area after the road, but and then there's a fence, and then there's the neighbor's house that's significantly lower.
Yeah, I think just part of this is going to end up being a town council question on whether or not they are comfortable approving a pool. And you've done your research and you have the statistics for other projects in the town that the town council has approved in the last 3 to 10 years. So it's really a question for them if they're willing to approve the variance with the pool being in the setback next to the road. It's not really that much of an issue of if it's too close to 102 Ivy Drive because it's not in the setback over there.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was my comment. So if neither Mark nor Joey has any other questions, I'm going to open it up. I'm sure Mr. Ching has some comments, and others in the audience might have comments or questions as well. Okay, would anyone in the audience like to make comments?
This is Mr. Ching, resident at 102 Ivy Drive. Accompanying me this evening at home is my wife, Melinda, who is off camera. First, let me say that the materials that you are seeing, the revised plan, it was posted, or we became aware of this today. We were aware of and pulled down and had the opportunity to review plans that are to some degree different from these as of last Friday. We prepared over the weekend our research. We have, by the way, the research that goes back to the time of the Hoopers. We were neighbors with the Hoopers, and we understood the theory of the yard, the theory of the house as it was built at that time. I prepared, along with Melinda, a response which appears to have been used in this revised design. And we were a little discomforted by the fact that we did not see this revised design for the opportunity to review it until about 5 o'clock this afternoon, at which point I noticed that and sent notes to the town regarding essentially what appears to be a response to a response without our opportunity to really look at the plans carefully and to consider what's being proposed. Having said that, I'm going to go back to my original set of materials that we had processed and sent in for the record to the ADR on Monday of this week. And I will only synopsize from it because I think the logic remains entirely the same. All right, so I'm going to read. We have received and studied the proposed revised landscape design and justification for setback variances from the town of Ross ADR. We reject and oppose the revised plans and justifications as it relates to the installation of the pool and spa complex. As we review the documents, it would appear that the Sweeneys and their landscape advisors have not heard the critical issues posed in our original opposition to the landscape design, with particular emphasis on the pool. Furthermore, the setbacks are designed to keep noise from neighboring properties. The revised proposed landscape pool and spa continue to be located outside the setbacks and are therefore illegal and not permitted under current town statute. The property was not sized for the pool. It never was. And that was the consideration coming from the original architect of the property. The fact that the plans are drawn up for a pool should never have been relied upon as legal certainty. And the Sweeneys are now pressing to impose a wrongly formulated landscape design with unsupportable setback and privacy assumptions as incurred as a huge expense to the privacy property rights attached to 102 Ivy Drive. Our privacy rights will be permanently injured as the single most impacted property if the pool and spa are permitted. Therefore, we object and will continue to voice our disapproval. When we reviewed the other materials, we had put together some specific observations, and I'll just synopsize a couple of them. The first is that, as indicated in the revised plan, moving the pool 4 feet does not mitigate the noise for 102 Ivy. And I think the ADR last time around recognized the fact that pools are an attractive nuisance. They do attract sound. And if you look at this design, the spa is closest to the property. So it is an entertainment zone, which is at the end of a series of new runways. So if you look at the back side of the house, there is a new bridge runway that takes it along the side of the house, across a patio towards the spa. This is the noise zone. This is the concern about privacy. The theory of this yard to begin with was to rotate towards the middle of the property. That's why the door is where it's located. That's why the wooden patio is where it's located. That was the original design of the yard. This is changing this. This yard was never designed to have a pool in it. Second, experience tells us that scaling the size of the pool down by a few feet will not change the level of the noise, and it still sits outside the setback. The proposed pool has not been moved, just slightly scaled down, ignoring the fundamental setback and privacy issue. Previously, west side of 70 Ivy Drive was quite part of the property, with master bedroom the Hoopers built within feet of their property line, and our master bedroom at 102 Ivy Drive built by a prior owner within 5 feet of the property line. In the current 70 Ivy project, a new traffic pattern for the house was created, enlarging the deck, wrapping it around the house to the west. If the pool and the spa are to be built, the noise from the area would increase in the place. Now, there are a number of references that are shown in the revised design. And our argument is basically that none of those references are relevant for the simple reason that this property is unique. It is situated in such a way that it's not comparable to the others in terms of the setback provisions, nor is it comparable with respect to the privacy issue. So we continue to strongly oppose the installation of the pool and the spa. Now, I'm going to again cite the 2 critical town issues that respect this issue, and it's under the current Town of Ross Design Review Standards 18.41.100.1, preservation of natural areas and existing site conditions. And I have outlined this for you and highlighted in yellow. The existing landscape should be preserved in its natural state by keeping the removal of trees, vegetation, rocks, and soils to a minimum. The current plan speaks specifically about taking out mature oak trees that have been there since the Hoopers were the owners, and a number of other vegetational issues. That is out of line with respect to the town code. Secondly, M, privacy. And I'll read it. Building placement and window size and placement should be selected with consideration given to protecting the privacy of surrounding properties. Decks, balconies, and other outdoor areas should be sited to minimize noise to protect the privacy and quietude of surrounding properties. Landscaping should be provided to protect privacy between properties. This plan does none of that. So therefore, while we appreciate the fact that the Sweeneys are looking to improve their property, we appreciate the fact that they want to landscape. They have spent a lot of time and money on the property itself. Our concern is over the pool and spa. We believe that the installation of the pool and spa will be a significant depreciation of our privacy and quietude at 102 Ivy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ching. Does anyone else in the audience have any comments? I'll give the owners a chance to respond if they want to after, but I'll see if anyone else in the audience would like to speak first. Okay. Do the owners want to comment on that, or should I just bring it back to the ADR?
I mean, the only thing I would add is that the terrace on the left side of our property is our primary entertaining space and always has been. It's the flat area that we all gravitate to. You know, we sit out there at night. Like, this is not going to change that. And the other thing, and I mean, I really do feel for Ward's position. But you know, our kids are grown. Like, we're not going to be having raging parties by the pool. Like, we just want a pool to swim in. So I just wanted to put that out there. So I think the perception is a little different than what the reality is going to be on the property. Not that it's really relevant to design, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
The other thing I was going to say is, I mean, we're trying to be good neighbors, and this is our 3rd round with Ward. We had 1 meeting in person verbally. We had the ADR 1, we had ADR 2. We're trying to be accommodating and work with them and be collaborative. It doesn't feel very collaborative. It feels pretty draconian, and it seems like the historical precedence for the property is what he's relying on, and he doesn't want a pool at all next to the property, regardless of the fact that it is outside of the side setback, which is really key. I think the other point I would just want to mention is he does have hardscape within his setback. It's within a couple feet of our fence. It's an entertainment area for him and Melinda, and that's where they entertain, and they have that on their side. It actually does work both ways. If we want to entertain on the side setback, that's okay. But we want to work together with you, Ward, but it is a balance, right? We're trying to be accommodating and keep revising to try to hit based on the comments. The comments do feel like they're changing from the prior ADR meeting too. The pole is moving.
Can I just reiterate? Am I live here?
Yes.
I just want to absolutely reiterate that we are not within the side setback. And I don't know how much more clear that can be, but we have done everything legally binding to be out of the side setback of the shared property. And somehow it seems like this is being disregarded and missed. And, you know, I think it's significantly clear that that's the case.
Mr. Ching has another comment. Could you unmute him, Patrick?
Thank you very much. I appreciate the fact that you think that there has been some misunderstanding of cooperation. Let me be very clear to the ADR. In the original conversations prior to the Sweeney's buying the property with their realtor, I made it very, very clear that the plan for a pool would be opposed because of the issues that I just described. I understand that you've made some changes to the construction or location of the pool relative to my site side that may be all right from a setback standpoint, but it's certainly not the case with respect to the road. And to suggest that we are being unneighborly, I've been very clear on the issue of privacy, very clear on the issue of a pool from the beginning. And it's not just with you, it was with the previous owner behind them, because we know what a pool will do, we know what the sound will do, and we know that that will change. My bedroom is facing your property. And the pool, the sound, the parties, which by the way have happened, are very, very clear in terms of how that noise rises and where it lands. And as far as we are concerned, we are very lucky and feel very fortunate to have lived on Ivy Drive, which is a private road for which there is a need for cooperation around the road. And that's been the case for the many, many, many years that we've lived there. This presents a completely different set of conditions. And we believe that the pool and the spa represent a serious invasion, permanent invasion of privacy.
Okay, thank you both, all three of you. And we're gonna bring it back now to the ADR for comments. Joey, Mark, would one of you like to go first? If you have any comments that are either the same or different than they were during the last meeting when we reviewed this project?
And Chair Krishnan, if I may,
Oh, yes.
I also have the plans that were reviewed previously. So the plan set that's on the screen right now is pretty much just about the changes to the pool. So if ADR group members would like to see the rest of the project to comment on the design for that, I'm happy to bring that up on my screen.
Sure. If it informs our decision tonight, it's probably important we see that, right?
Thank you, Patrick.
If it's materially different.
Are you going to put it up from your screen, Patrick?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Coming up now.
Could you zoom in on the pool, that corner? Yeah, that blue, the rendering, just zoom in a little bit.
And this is the old plan.
Joey, you have any comments? Do you?
Yeah,
wanna
I
go
do.
back to the
I
proposal?
mean, Do you want me to go first or do you want?
Sure.
Yeah, please go first, Joey.
Okay. Okay. So thanks for coming back, you guys. I think we're getting closer. I have to say, when I first saw this revision, I was a little disappointed it wasn't more dramatic. And I looked at our notes, our meeting notes, and it's something I want to discuss with the ADR and kind of the new organization at the town, is that I think our notes need to have more detail in them to say what we actually said in terms of the things we suggested doing. But that said, the more I have reviewed it, really we have to separate what we're talking about here. We're talking about Mr. Cheng and their concerns on that side. We pulled it out. It's out of the setbacks there. And then it's really about, is the town going to allow a variance for this front yard setback to be broken? And in this particular case, I can see an argument for that because Ivy Drive, it's a road. It's not impacting anyone. There's cars on the road. The people across the street are down 20 feet. So I can see an argument for that we've pulled it out of the side setback. The Changs have a patio and an entertaining space in their setback. So I kind of get that argument. I just wish you had gone a little further. You had crossed the bridge a little more and moved it a little further to the right. And then my other comment would be that the spa really is, I will tell you just from my own personal experience, it's something that's used a lot more in the winter. And it's a thing that's used at night, and it can have more talk when people might want to be sleeping. So I would really strongly consider flipping the orientation of that. So it's on the other side of the pool at a minimum. And then just seeing, could you just bend a little more and just move that pool further to the right? But in terms of the front yard setback, I do not have a problem with the way it's designed. It's a variance. I mean, it's the one thing I will mention to the applicants is this is why it's very difficult for us to support variances, because then we get nailed on the next application with a big list of all the places we've allowed this to happen. And when you think of the actual setbacks, it's 15 feet on the side, 20 feet on the front, 25 feet on the front, and 40 on the back. So we end up having to do variances for every single one of these pools. They're never conforming, except for my own. But anyhow, that is why it's really hard to say, all right, this one's okay, because then a month from now we pay. Someone says, are you allowed one in the 2 feet away from the property line? But the findings are here for me to support the variance from the front yard setback. They have, basically if Mr. Cheng had his, basically they're out of the side yard setback. So it shouldn't matter to him. They've done what they need to do on that side. And pools are noisy. So there has to be more accommodations made. Maybe you can move it a little more, but in terms of like what I wanted, maybe flipping it to the other side of the property, I can see that that's probably not going to happen. And the question now is more, are we going to allow the variance on the front yard setback, which I can support with this application? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mark, would you like to go next? Oh, sorry, were you done, Joey?
Yes.
Okay. Mark, would you like to go next?
Yes, Patrick, maybe you could switch back to the current proposal. This was helpful to see, by the way. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And I'll just ask one clarifying question. I should have asked it before. There's a dashed line to the left of the pool there. That looks like it was the original location of the coping or the pool itself?
That was
Is
the
that-
original coping.
That was your original coping. Okay, thank you. Yeah, this is a tough one. I think Stephen said it last week, right? This is a tough scenario because we are out of the side yard setback, as the applicant has mentioned a number of times. I don't think, I'm not personally too worried about the street setback. You guys have done a little mitigation there. The street is centered on noise to begin with, so that doesn't concern me much. I think I can understand Mr. Cheng's issues. I think I fall in line with Joey. I would support this if we flip the spa to the other side. I recognize probably why the spa is on that left side due to its relationship to the deck, but knowing the noise that's generated from the spa and then trying to talk over the spa noise, I live with this in my rear yard every day, so I recognize that as a sort of a center of activity and noise. So flipping that to the center of the property would probably be a dramatic improvement as far as sound mitigation goes. So I could probably, knowing you've moved it actually, a pretty significant distance away from that side property line where the major concern is, I think I could support it if we could find a way to flip those, the spa to the right-hand side of the pool. I'm not particularly concerned, as I mentioned, about the Ivy Drive setback. I do share Joey's concerns. Some properties are not designed for pools, right? So we do end up with a lot of variances. Sometimes, you have to wonder, you have to start to question whether or not there really is truly, rationale to award a variance in a property that might not be able to support it due to the setbacks and the size of the home on the piece of property. This is a unique property due to its slope on one side and the road on the opposite side. So there might be some findings that could be made. I still struggle with that. I think Joey's right. We try to accommodate, we try to make sure we're making the right decisions, but in the end, these setbacks are there for a reason. In this particular case, the front yard setback is unique because of its relationship to this particular roadbed. So I think my final statement would be I can support this by flipping the spa to the other side. I think that is a significant move to mitigate sound to the 1 Oak piece of property.
Thank you, Mark. I pretty much agree with everything the other two have said, especially pointing out once again that it's not in the side yard setback at all. In this, the applicant needs a variance and it's up to the town council, but because the town council has to grant one, they may be able to influence the pool more than if it was just in the middle of a big yard and not in the setbacks at all. And I would also think that moving that spa to the other side would help, and or just moving, I don't see why the pool can't just be 10 feet farther from the Ching house. And you could say, well, it's still out of the setback for the Ching house where it is now, and I agree. However, it is going to be in a setback, so maybe having it further to the right and or switching the spa would be very helpful. And obviously the town council is going to need to approve it, not just the design, but also, and the design itself is fine. If it wasn't a variance, it wouldn't be a question. But if the town council has to approve it based on the variance, they're probably going to be looking at, well, what have you done as far as the spa location and the pool location? I don't think anyone's really concerned about the noise if you're standing on what we're looking at now, the D of Ivy Drive. If someone's 5 feet closer, 5 feet farther away swimming when you're on the road, no one really cares. So I would agree with the other two. And that's it.
Why couldn't you move it over 8 feet further, and instead of having 5 of those concrete pavers, have 3 to enter to the front porch, and have it more in the middle of the the front yard there. Like that, those pavers that go to your front porch, they're not really entertaining space. Why couldn't you just move that whole thing over? I know the aesthetics and the architectural consideration of wanting that pool to line up with the edge of the house, but if you're getting a bonus, if you're basically getting a freebie and being let out of the front yard setback, why can't you just really try to extra super duper get out of that side yard one?
Well, anyway, that's something I think the applicant should think about, because moving it a little to the right and switching the spa and then seeing what the town council says about that. Okay, so Patrick, that's it for this project, and we'll move on. Thank you to the Sweeneys, the Changs, and the design team.
Thanks. Thanks, you guys.
Thank
It'll
you.
work out. Something will work out.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move on to new business, the Stevens residence at 5 Madera Avenue. Patrick, would you like to start us off with a brief project description?
For this one, I'm going to hand it over to Matthew.
Okay, Matthew.
Great. Good evening, ADR group members. Planner Matthew Weintraub. The project is the Stevens residence at 5 Madera Avenue. Excuse me. Stacy Ford is the architect and applicant. The project proposes to construct a new shade structure over an existing deck at the existing residence. The existing deck is non-conforming with respect to the minimum required rear yard setback and is located 18 feet 9 inches from the property line and approximately 40 feet away from the nearest neighboring residence at 14 Baywood Avenue. The new shade structure would conform to the 30-foot maximum building height requirement, and it would not add new floor area, lot coverage, or impervious surfaces. A nonconformity permit is required in order to improve the existing nonconforming deck with a new shade structure. Approval of a nonconformity permit is subject to a finding that the project substantially conforms to the design review criteria and standards. The applicant conducted neighborhood outreach by contacting neighbors with visibility to the existing deck. The neighborhood outreach description was transmitted to the ADR group members as late correspondence. Staff has not received any public comments on the project. Staff is seeking the ADR group's recommendation regarding the consistency of the proposed project with the intent and criteria of design review. Staff will forward the ADR group's recommendation to the town council for consideration at the time that the application is heard by the town council. And this concludes my introduction to the project, and I'm available to answer questions of the ADR group members.
Thank you. Stacy, are you going to be presenting this to us? Do you have drawings to show us? Oh, hold on, Stacy's muted. Just a second, Stacy.
Mute, unmute.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. I actually sent over to Matt ahead of time some photographs from the for the Madera Avenue parking area up onto the deck. And so if you'd like to play those now, I'll actually give you a little running commentary. This house is built in 1923. And so it has lots of historic type detail on it. And so our plans for this structure will also have some little historic details, but really it is just to protect this deck, which is extremely hot on the southwest facing deck. It's a wonderful deck. You see over the top of the trees, it seems like an olive marin, but you get roasted off of this deck. Matt, can you start the slideshow?
So I believe Patrick has access to that.
Okay.
And I believe that will be coming in just a minute.
Oh, great. The house itself.
Emailed earlier today.
Yeah, I'll let you start.
Okay. Let me,
The last time I did one of these, then I somehow messed up me being on it. I was able to do the video, but I had a difficulty, so thought you guys could do it.
Patrick, if you check your recent email, it should be in your very recent email.
I'll tell you what, I'll give you a little bit of background on this. The house itself is quite large behind this deck. The house itself is probably over 40 feet high. As I said, it was built in 1923, and this southwest deck seems like it was added within about 10-ish years, 10, 15 years, and it's a wonderful deck, but it is right outside the living room as well. And so what it ends up doing is overheating all of the house. So we'd like to shade the deck with a framework of louvers so that they can stop having to turn on their AC like during the summer, because they're wanting to keep everything as natural as possible. Here we go. On the left, you can actually see they're doing some permitted work inside the house. There's a small garage, and you can see the height of the house beyond. And just poking out of one of the guardrails, you see one of the story poles. And on the right, you've already come up the stairs. There's this beautiful walk through, just fabulous, fabulous plants on this property. And so you see the deck beyond that's about, as I recall, it was about, 25 by 18 feet. And you can see several umbrellas there. You can't even see all of them. They've had to put these umbrellas out there that are huge to try and shield some of the sun. You can also, if you want to go to the next slide. Thank you. You see the left side of it and the right side of it. And you can see there's these umbrellas all over the place. And you can also see that we're basically way above everybody. There's very few people, even like pieces of roofs that you can see from this deck. Mostly you can see a few roofs. So that line that you're seeing is the top is at 11 feet, and the bottom of this framework will be at 10. And the louvers will be buried within that 1 foot. And it'll have some little, you can see this wonderful railing. The posts will be coming out of each of those sort of elevated, bigger posts. How about next slide? You can, from Baywood, I did go around just to see if I could see anything anywhere, because you can sometimes see a few cars from up on the deck. But all you see there that was the only glimpse that I could get. And I believe that is, the master bedroom roof. So you can see that there's been a really, just, typical in Ross, how there's just like leafy plants everywhere and sort of a layering of plants all up and down the sloped hills have kept this house from being very private to all the people down on Baywood. And on the right, this is an example of the company, what it's called Structure, and they make these louvers that can be controlled mechanically. They have limited lighting in, and you can put these fans. We don't think that we'll need to have any fans, and if there's any lighting, it would be very, very limited. Typically what they do is they use candles on tables now, and that has been more than adequate. How about next slide? This, you see the overall site plan. It is extremely quirky. What happened was where the house is located, that was the original property. And then the previous owner, the Coons, bought this wonderful, really steep lot all the way up to Baywood. And they created a very extensive paths going up through just fabulous plantings. It's really a treat to go up there. And there is a spa up at the top. But the reason, so originally I think when the house was built in 1923, it actually conformed to all the setbacks, kind of like a miracle. But as Ross has developed and sort of layered on some more precautions for all the other neighbors, setbacks have become very big, because initially this house would fit within its setbacks. The two neighbors that have responded is the lady below, Alice Reeve, who is at 14 Baywood. And I think the history with her is she has had issues with previous neighbors. But the Stevens have decided that it's a better move to become a good neighbor to people before you ask for projects. And so they've enjoyed being her neighbor. To the right, number 7 is Rick Newton. And he also had no problems. He's just, enjoy your house. That's great. He, I believe, does not live there, and it has been rented. But other than that, you can see that the louvers are shown in 2 of the bays. And the bay closest to the front door, we don't believe really needs to have the louvers. And then it can just be shining on the stone that will be adjacent to the entry. The only other thing we're really talking about doing is just changing from a somewhat beat up redwood deck that will probably put a harder ipe wood finish, so that dogs, grandkids, riding bikes, there's many generations that are enjoying this house these days. So none of the neighbors have any issues. And we just want to keep with sort of the spirit of the historical house, where there's no attempt to, bring this into 2020, but we would rather have details that recall 1923 on the ends of the wood beams. And I believe that's, if you have any questions.
Thank you. Mark and Joey, did either of you have any questions?
No.
I wasn't, let me just see if I can understand this, Stacy. Are you proposing lighting within the structure or not? I know you mentioned a little bit.
There will probably be only in the 2 louver bays. It looks like what is provided by them could be one like low voltage, downlight. Okay. Just for general lighting. And I do not believe those lights would be able to be even seen from 14 Baywood below. I think those would be protected by other screening. There's some kind of, there's 3 or 4 evergreens that are kind of coming up right in the perfect place at this corner to protect, even in the future, would protect everything.
Thank you.
Okay, does anyone in the audience have any questions before I bring it back to the ADR for final comments? I can't see, does anyone, let me scroll down. No one's raising a hand. Okay, Mark, would you like to go first this time?
Sure. Yeah, I don't have any particular issues with this project. We've seen this one before for a long time ago for those paths above the unit.
Right.
No, I think this will make this a more usable space. It is fairly well screened. I think one thing to note, we talk about screening, just we've seen instances in town where we've relied on screening down the road due to WUI standards and guidelines, et cetera. Those screening trees get eliminated. So I think it's important for us to recognize that while they may be there today, there's a very good chance that if fire department has their way, that a lot of those might be removed. I don't think that changes my support of the project. I just wanted to point it out as we think about things that are up on the hill that are really prone to fire and to things like WUI standards. So I think this, if done, we haven't really seen a lot of the details of what this looks like. You talked a little bit about matching some of the details within the home. I would encourage it to be thoughtful that way, but I would imagine that you've thought that through a little bit. So I don't have any particular concerns.
Joey?
Yeah, I don't have any objection to this, and I've lived up on a hill with beating sun, and we used to consider something like this. So I completely get your desire to do this. I just have a couple concerns that I think should be hit or checked when this is finally approved. I don't think there should be any built-in lighting in this structure. I just think it has the potential of being a little bit of a lantern at night, and you could achieve, nice lighting with just things on your tabletop. And then furthermore, I felt the structure had it might not be quite as respectful to the vintage nature of this home. As you see, those railings on the deck they have kind of a quaint feeling to them. And then this structure felt a little more modern. See that, the little cutouts there, and like heavy articulation with the big columns with the caps. And I just drove up to it and I thought, wow, somehow that garage got slipped in there, and it doesn't really relate to the house at all. Let's not make another mistake and have a third style tacked onto this house. Let's try to figure out what the original style of the home was with these railings and create a cabana that actually looks like it might have been designed by the original architect, because clearly the garage was not. Those are my comments.
I would just concur. I think what Joey said is excellent. The structure, I have no problem with it. It's better not to have lighting. And I think especially those posts leading up to the trellis should be in the same style as much as possible as what's existing there, because what's existing there is really nice.
Oh, I have one more comment. Just sometimes these things have a way of, in 5 or 10 years, becoming a room, or, like an addition to the house. I think that the council needs to be aware of that it's a little bit of a creep, that it becomes a covered porch and then it becomes a room. So the council may want to pay attention to that, and that should be in the notes.
Okay, great. Well, those are our final comments. Thank you for your time this evening. And now we'll move on to the next project. At 33 Bolinas Avenue, the Tracy residence. Mark, I believe you have some experience with homes being raised to get them out of the flood zone. Matthew or Patrick, would one of you like to start off with the presentation?
Yes, thank you. Good evening again, ADR group members, planner Matthew Weintraub. The project is the Tracy residence at 33 Bolinas Avenue. Andrew Rogers is the architect and applicant. The project proposes to lift the existing residence by 5 feet in its current location in order to elevate the habitable space out of the floodplain. The project would create a newly enclosed crawl space under the house, and it would increase the building height by 5 feet. The elevated house would conform to the maximum allowed building height of 30 feet. The existing house is non-conforming with respect to the minimum required side yard setbacks and the maximum allowed floor area and lot coverage. The project would maintain the existing non-conforming side yard setbacks, which cannot practically be decreased. It would reduce the non-conforming floor area, and it would slightly increase the non-conforming lot coverage. A non-conformity permit is required in order to alter a structure with existing non-conforming setbacks and lot coverage, and design review is required because the project proposes to increase the existing building height. The applicant has submitted a neighborhood outreach description, which is included as attachment 4 to the staff report. Staff has not received any public comments on the project design. Staff is seeking the ADR group's recommendation regarding the consistency of the proposed project design with the intent and criteria of design review. Staff will forward the ADR group's recommendation to the town council for consideration at the time that the application is heard by the town council. This concludes my introduction to the project, and I'm available to answer questions of the ADR group members.
Before we go on to Andy's presentation here, on these projects, first of all, I think it's great whenever anyone gets anything out of the floodplain. Is it not almost a by of right that anyone who's in the floodplain is allowed to do this? There's some town regulations. Could you just go over what those are in general with us?
Well, a project such as this is subject to discretionary permits. There is no exemption from discretionary review for a project that is proposing to lift a house out of the floodplain.
Right. And in other ones of this that have been done, are they usually For some reason, I thought that this space underneath that's in the floodplain was built more as a pass-through rather than an enclosed space. Or is that not usually the case?
The project I'm most familiar with is 53 Sir Francis Drake, which did include that exact feature, which was essentially an elevated structure with almost an open crawl space area where water could flow very smoothly. That project and that property is located directly adjacent to a creek that runs right adjacent to the backyard. And so I think for that particular project, it made sense because of the increased frequency and volume of water. This project is not located directly adjacent to a stream. And so that may be one of the considerations why this project is proposing a closed-in crawl space.
Okay, thank you. Oh yeah, Mr. Rogers, would you like to go? We don't have your video.
Oh, sorry about that. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Yep, there.
Welcome.
Sure. Thank you. I think probably the best thing for me to do is to walk everybody through the plans. Does that make sense? And on the heels of what you just said, just by way of some history, this house was flooded. I can't remember the year. I think it was something like 15 years ago, apparently, given how it sits. And you can see that in the lower drawing here, the existing west elevation. The lower level sits down pretty close to grade, and apparently there was close to 2 feet of water on that level. And that is living space. That's half of the house's living space. So most recently, the clients wanted to simply remodel their kitchen, and they discovered partway into the process that there was mold in the house. And once they dug into it, they found out that there was considerable mold that was probably a result of that flooding from years ago, and decided that lifting the house was the best thing to do going forward and for the future. So we brought a surveyor on board and to ascertain exactly where the house sits as it is now and how much we needed to elevate it to meet the current FEMA standards. And so that's pretty much dictated why we're proposing a 5-foot raising of the house. Unfortunately, we still stay under the overall height limit, with that being the case. So the current proposal is to keep the second floor of the house on, at least as far as the exterior goes, and at least as far as the roof goes, to keep that just as it is now. Given the layout, given the interior layout changes, there's going to be some alterations to exterior windows and doors, but not a whole lot. But on the lower level, given that the existing house is built on a concrete slab, that whole level is basically going to be new construction. There's no way to save that. They'll basically elevate the house starting below the second floor structure. But we want to keep with the same aesthetic that's there now. And so we're staying consistent with the materials and the types of windows. On the ground level, we thought it would be a good design decision to go with a smooth stucco finish for the crawl space and to not carry the wood siding all the way down to the grade. Probably what'll happen is there'll be a fair number of vent openings in the crawl space, just in case the area does flood again, to allow the water to kind of move in and out, excuse me, from below the 2 stories. I wanted to bring up, oh, I guess I can share this. I was going to bring up a Google Earth image. Is it possible for me to do that from my end, or are we just on the plans?
Are you looking to help us to locate the property within the floodplain, or you have a site plan, I believe, on this as well, right? In the drawings.
And we've all been to the property, so
Yeah, we understand it.
I think we're fine just looking at the elevations.
Okay, fine. You hopefully most of you were able to see that we did get story poles up yesterday to show what the new height of the building would look like. The primary reason I wanted to go to the Google Earth image is to let everybody know that last Friday we met with 2 of the neighbors to just go over the plans with them, because there was some concern about the impact given the proposed raising of the house by 5 feet. We met with the neighbor who was immediately to the west on Bolinas. His name is Baird, and his property's probably the most affected by this project, just given the proximity and where his house sits. So does my cursor show up here? Does my arrow show up?
No, your cursor won't.
Okay.
Yeah. I
Got
see.
it. It's at your end.
It does. Someone's done.
So the two neighbors who showed up was immediately to the west, so not going toward the church, but the other direction. Yep. And then Margie, who is behind, her property is to the south. And there was a concern about the rear deck, my client's deck, which was more recently built. I want to say maybe 5 years ago or so. There was a concern about what would happen with that deck going up 5 feet from where it is now. And that prompted me to go over with my clients some design options and possibilities for addressing those concerns. And as a result of that, we are doing some redesign, and it will likely entail taking the deck that's there now and making it half the depth that it is. Currently it's 12 feet deep, and we'll likely reduce it to 6 feet deep. And possibly we will take the living spaces, which are currently on the second floor, and put them on the first floor, which is something that we had thought about anyhow some time ago. So I just wanted to let you know that is likely going to be a revised plan that we'll be submitting soon, and it definitely helps address the concerns brought up by both of those 2 neighbors. That's pretty much it, and happy to answer any questions.
Joey or Mark, do you have any questions, or would you like Patrick or Matthew to go back to any elevations that you could look at, or questions about the rear deck and the potential proposed changes to these plans?
No, I did take some pictures there. Does anyone have any photographs of the front with the story poles, or the front with or the back with the deck and the story poles? Is that part of the submission?
I actually have some photos, but I don't know how to show those.
With the story poles?
As they were going up, yeah.
If they're on your computer, you can go to share screen. It should be a green box on the bottom of Zoom.
Oh, I see. This will stop others. Okay, got it. I see. So I don't have this teed up right on my.
I can.
Let me, I think I can get this figured out. No. Okay, let's see. Sorry about that. I'm just trying to sort this out. Oh, here we go.
I have some good ones I can share screen on.
So is that coming up, or is it? Are folks
Yes.
Yeah, we're seeing that.
So this is while the story poles are in process, so they don't yet have the lines officially pulled across to represent the new roof line, but you can see all these story poles are exactly 5 feet tall, which represents the top of the new roof.
What is the minimum to accommodate FEMA's requirements?
So I want to say that about 3.5 feet of the proposed 5 feet lifting of the house are to meet FEMA standards. The rest of that is to get my clients a 9-foot ceiling on the lower level. And currently it's it's about 7'6" or 7'8". It's kind of depressing dark space now. So that's how that breaks down.
Can I ask you what the history of this house was? Was that garage space and basement down there? And was that why it was 7'6" originally?
I honestly don't know what the history is. I just know what it was when my clients bought it, which is the way it is now, basically. I'm not sure what it was prior to that.
Okay.
It is funny though, there is no garage. I mean, the parking is in the front yard, basically.
I have a feeling the garage was under the house, like most of the houses on that street.
I bet that's correct, especially given that it has a concrete slab, on that.
Yeah, and then it was converted to living space at grade with a 7'6" ceiling, and now we're trying to fix that.
Right.
But I think that's my guess as to the history.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Joey, was there something you wanted to show us from your pictures?
Oh, yes. Let me see if I can share. It says this will stop other screen sharing. Do you want to continue? Yes, I'm just going to see if I can. I don't know what's going to happen. You guys might see like my pictures of my dogs. My dog okay. So I just wanted to show you, this was the picture I took from the backyard today of that deck would then be raised up 5 feet. And there's the neighbor down there.
Right.
And then, hold on just a sec.
And that deck is currently how deep?
12 feet.
And that's what you're going to cut down to 6 feet?
Yeah.
In your new proposal?
That's the current thinking. And the other piece of that is a thought about putting in a spiral stair instead of that straight run stair so that it would take up less space.
Okay.
This is the view from the Connors house next door. Just in, proportion, you've got this 1-story building here and you've got this. The one thing I wish, usually we have people do a string or something to actually denote what that roof plane is going to look like.
I agree. Was this yesterday or today?
Like usually we do a mesh. Today this is this afternoon.
Oh.
At 4:40 p.m.
Oh, I thought there should be orange.
We do like actually a orange mesh or something where people can actually envision the roof plane.
Yeah.
But it's just the same exact roof line, just up 5 feet. Everywhere, right?
It's a little more dramatic if you've got the mesh there and the string, and it actually shows what the planes are going to be.
Right.
I just wanted you guys to see that, and I will stop sharing now. If I can do that. We can go back to, I'm still not a pro at, stop share, found it. Okay. Still learning this.
Okay. So there's no one in the audience, other than Elizabeth. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments on this project? Okay. Mark, do you have any comments or questions before we make our final comments?
No, but it'd be helpful to see the elevations and plans again, just to have those brought up that we can reference. Yeah. And I'm curious to know, Andy, your conversations with the rear neighbor, the neighbor to the south, their concern was around the deck.
Right.
Were you able to succinctly discern any concerns from the Connor residents from Baird, what they were mostly concerned about?
You know, I think it was kind of the same thing. The deck, and I also just think the overall impact of their house being 5 feet taller.
Yeah,
but I think that there was a little bit of a privacy concern because their house has a fair amount of windows facing my client's house. So we've already had some discussions about any new windows on that side. We'd probably want to have them be frosted glass for mutual privacy, but still allowing my client some natural light. I think that for sure, reducing the footprint of this deck is going to help that property as well. And if we do go with the spiral stair plan, that would be on their side, and that would also entail moving that edge of the deck back a little bit from that side property line. So I think all of that helps both neighbors and them in particular.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the only question I had, Mark.
Okay. Well, for final comments, Mark, would you actually like to go first? And if you are, could you do me a favor and make sure that your comments include comments regarding the ground floor windows, the new versions, and what do you think of those?
Yeah. So let's maybe go to the plan just real quickly so I totally understand. Yeah, that's a good spot, right? On the second floor plan. So maybe we scroll down. There you go. Thank you. I was going to suggest one thing. I'm glad, Andy, that you brought it up. The idea of the deck moving away from the western edge of the building.
Yep.
I think the depth, truthfully, the depth, whether it's 6 feet or 4 feet, or I'm sorry, 6 feet more shallow, would mostly be about limiting the activity on the deck versus the impact on the southern neighbor.
Right.
So the smaller the deck is, the less noise and visual impact you're going to have on the southern neighbor and the western neighbor, the Connor. So I guess my initial thought was, you can see the property line is very close to that edge of that deck. It's probably about 8 feet away, maybe.
Yeah.
On the western property line. So the further you can pull that to the east, I think would make a significant impact. And I see, so the proposal you've verbalized is taking that straight run stair and putting a spiral on the western edge of the stair. Is that the idea?
And the western edge of the deck, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that would mean it would, generally these spirals are about 5 feet, right?
In diameter, yeah.
Plus or minus.
But to be clear, we would keep it out of the side yard. In other words, it wouldn't go past the edge of the house, and that's why the western edge of the deck would slide in accordingly.
Yeah. Okay. One comment about that I don't know if this is, depending on the material of the stair, generally they're steel, right? They're exterior,
Yeah,
they're steel.
correct.
I would encourage some sort of tread that minimizes the amount of noise. I know that in my experience in going up and down spiral stairs, they can be awfully loud.
Yes.
Kids, whatever, so whatever that might be, whether that's a wood inset tread or even something that might be a rubber material, might minimize the amount of noise because they tend to reverberate, right? They kind of
Yep.
get a sound going. So I would encourage that deck to be pulled back as much as possible and maybe go with that spiral stair solution to minimize the impact on the western neighbor.
I agree. That's reasonable. And I want to also point out that part of this new plan will likely entail the living space going to the lower level, which means that this spiral stair is primarily for egress. It's not going to be used all that often because it's coming down from what will be the bedroom level. So.
That would be a significant change. I'm sure that that also would flip the amount of time someone's looking out those windows on the second story. Yes. Versus first story. Now, I will admit from a design perspective, as a homeowner, I would probably rather have the living space up higher. But
Well,
I applaud you for flipping them because it would make a difference as far as visual impact and privacy.
For sure, there's a lot of trade-offs, but the other thing that's going on is that my clients have 4 children who have already left, and so they're planning for the long term, and so having their living level and master bedroom on the first floor could make things easier. So
Totally understand that. If we could flip to the elevations, maybe, I think. I think so. From a planning perspective, I think that's fine. I've raised my home. The deck is always one of those that gets the neighbors, nervous, and rightfully so. I think the front elevation is improved from where it is today. I think the window, the proportions are probably appropriate for a 9-foot front facade. I think that's fine. I think the little addition of a little roof and covered area off to the left is totally fine and very respectful as far as mass goes to the neighbors to the east. And maybe we flip around to the west elevation, or whatever the elevation is next on this one. Yeah, this would be our west elevation. So you can see there is a dramatic increase of fenestration on the lower level. Yeah. My original thought was those are probably what, 5-foot vertical, the windows on the lower level.
I think some of them are 6 actually.
It might be 6, yeah. I mean, I think that's a pretty dramatic increase. Now I know that there's a brand new fence in between the 2 properties.
Yep.
But because of the base elevation and then the 9-foot plate height, those windows now will be, the tops of those windows are significantly over the fence, right? So we have a 6-foot fence. Yeah. That fence rises up probably only not even to the middle of those 6-foot windows. So I think an effort to, I recognize if this is now the living space, this is, a lot of, you want to have as much natural light as possible. I would potentially say that we might be over fenestrated in that particular level on this facade due to the proximity of the neighboring home.
Yep, understood.
And it's mostly because you've got it at 9 feet. And originally I thought, well, maybe this should be pulled down to an 8-foot plate to pull the building as tight as possible. You're under the height limit. I don't know if a foot is going to make that much of a substantive impact. But it could be, if you were looking to, let's put it this way, flipping the 2, having that be the living space downstairs makes sense for it to be a 9-foot ceiling. If that was to remain as the bedroom level, I would say that could come down and bring the entire home down a foot. But I respect the idea that is going to benefit the neighbors to be the living level below. So maybe we flip around. I don't think I have any issues with the southern elevation. Like that is, there's a lot of glass there, but that is to the rear yard.
Yeah.
So I think it's reasonably appropriate. I think I would be interested to know what happens at that upper level as far as fenestration. If that does turn into the living or the bedroom level, I would expect maybe slightly less glass at the upper level, but I don't have a particular problem with it because it faces the rear yard. Okay. There is a mixture of window styles that we're dealing with here. And I think maybe that is, if Dan Winey was here, he would probably point that out, or maybe Joey will. You've got this mullion mutton component on the upper level. You seem to have lost that at the lower level. I don't have a problem with that because it's consistent floor to floor, but you may want to give that a little thought on what to breaking up those tall 6-foot windows in a little different fashion.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. We've looked at some different options there. We're keeping it with the double hungs to try to be consistent. We're planning to go with similar proportions in exterior casing. There was a thought to not replicate the mullions on the lower level, but to keep them consistent on the upper level, even where we're changing a few windows out. So, it's just something I'm not sure I have the right design answer for you. I see there's some awning and there's some casement up top. And that's fine. I would almost say it would be interesting to see if there were some muttons or mullions in the upper sash of the lower windows.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. To sort of give it this connectivity to the upper windows if you keep those. Right. Joey may have, or Mark may have some other suggestions. And I think the eastern facade, if we scroll down to this is the eastern facade here. Yeah, I don't have any particular issues with this facade at all. I think it's reasonably appropriate for what you're trying to do. And again, I appreciate that you brought that entry stair down, which I think helps that side of the facade, and brought that lower roof in. So, you know, I think that's the summation of the comments I have. Mostly, maybe I would say one thing. You see a lot of the homes that are raised because you're doing a full demolition of the lower level. You do have the option to play with that belly band a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't have to be. It would appear when this is completed that you raised it and did an addition to that lower. You know, you essentially just rebuilt the foundation. You know, I would feel free to maybe even play with that belly band, raising it up a little bit to minimize the mass that the home now. You know, that larger facade that you've got. That's essentially 20 plus feet of facade. I'm not sure, you could play around with it a little bit. I don't know if you've brought it up to the sill level, that might just be interesting to play with, but by no means that's stepping on your design skill there. So I thought of it when you brought up the stucco on the bottom.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. It's funny, when you first said that, I thought you were going to be referring to a belly band between the first and second level, but you're referring to what there isn't now, but I don't think that's needed. But I hear what you're saying on the lower.
Yeah, I don't think it's needed, but the front facade is fine, and it has a presence to the street. It will be bigger in contrast to some of their homes around it, but you have every right to get it out of the floodplain. I will say, when we raised our home, we had a FEMA grant. Hopefully your clients will apply for a FEMA grant to raise the home.
I didn't even know about that. Yeah.
We were able to get a good amount of money covered for that work. They did require, Mark is to some degree correct, they required a particular square inch to square foot ratio of ventilation and pass through for that crawl space.
At the crawl space, yeah.
Yeah, I kind of remember them yelling at me that I didn't have enough.
I
said, oops. But because there is the idea that that you're not presenting a wall to the flood plain coming, or the flood coming from the north. I don't, in practice, do whatever the FEMA requirements are, but you'll end up with a number of different ventilation spaces down there.
Yeah. Got it. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, and last but not least, I would think that from a mechanical perspective, you're going to do something in regards to a sump pump, or they get wet down there because we're in a very, very low lying area. So, I would ask the current occupants whether they ever see any moisture down there, and they might just want to think of that as a mitigating future safeguard.
Yeah, good to know.
Yeah,
I've got that noted.
Yeah, I think that's about it, though. I am fully everyone getting up and out of the floodplain. So, kudos to the owners who are doing this work.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess one comment about the neighbors and the fact that this is going to go up higher than a lot of the neighbors. It could be the case that in 10 or 20 years those houses are elevated as well. So.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah. Joey or Mark, over to you.
Joey, would you like to go next or last?
Sure. Disclosure, I'm friends with Adam and Libby Tracy, and I love them. They're great. And I would love them to get the most beautiful house out of this effort possible. So that's where I start with my comments, is just really wanting to, perfect this and get it right for them. Because I know it's a dream of theirs, and they also need to get this out of the floodplain. Starting from that point, I will say that I would view this as an opportunity to get this right and to maybe correct some flaws of the existing house. I think just to lift up what's there by 5 feet is probably a solution that they could maybe do a little better. They could, for the same amount of money, they're going to end up basically taking this place down to the studs. And so I think we should look at this as an opportunity to, make this not just what it is raised up 5 feet, but a new, beautiful, architecturally significant home. So to that end, these are my comments. I do believe that it should be raised. Just because there is a 30-foot height limit doesn't mean that everybody goes to 30 feet. And especially with a flat pitched roof like what we have here, I don't know that that's appropriate. I think we are approaching more of a apartment building type of proportion rather than a home. And I think, you know, it's a very boxy building. It's straight up, and just to jack it up 5 feet, I think there could be more relief with the roof planes. They could be more steeply pitched. To that end, I think it's a really good idea to get a floor plan that would actually be really good for them as they age, and kind of the floor plan that everybody wants anyway for resale value is where you have the living spaces and the public spaces give out to the pool. And that's a really, and that may enable you to, instead of having the east elevation be kind of the most gracious, residential in feeling where nobody can really see it, maybe you consider making the front elevation an actual front door. You know, that's in our design standards where you actually see the front door and you see some kind of porch or recessed porch. The idea that you're percolating now to move the public areas to the ground level could support having a little bit more of a formal orientation of that house instead of having the front door on the side where no one can see it.
Mm-hmm.
It would also give a little more relief to that front facade, which right now you're basically just kind of taking what's there and jacking it up 5 feet and putting a plaster foundation down below. I think it could just have a lot more graciousness if you indeed do decide to go ahead with this flip. There are some other reasons for that as well. I would argue that, you know, to have a giant deck overhanging in the back is just going to make those rooms in the back really dark on the first level. Whereas if you make the bedrooms on the top level, they really don't need much of a deck at all. And they could have pitched ceilings, and there could be a 28-foot peak and a much more steeply sloped roof that would give more relief to that home. So those are kind of my biggest, I really feel like putting that huge deck up 5 feet, it's already towering over the neighbors. I think that's an entertainment zone, and you're basically putting it 5 feet higher in the air. But I also think, just for Libby and Adam, I think it'll be a way better house if all the entertainment areas are on the first floor. And
which is exactly what we're doing, yeah.
Exactly. You have the higher ceiling on the first floor, and why don't you make a lower ceiling on the second floor with peaked ceilings and some interesting roof forms that break up this kind of more, it's approaching a commercial scale at what it is proposed right now. It'd be great to see the front door.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, because that is part of what we've been looking at with this flip. We've been looking at the option of moving the front door to the front of the house instead of on the side, which is where it is now.
It could be very charming.
Yeah, so that's under consideration.
And possibly, I'm also usually not a fan of the plaster base on a building unless it's heavily planted around it, because it just, I don't know. We've had some bad experiences with that. I think either stone, like a stone veneer, looks really nice, or big plantings to cover that, so it's not just plaster.
I agree. I agree. And we do have a landscape architect on board who I think is very skilled, and we just have not hit that yet. But I'm envisioning a lot of plants hiding this stuff. And what you also described exactly what we're doing, which is minimizing that upper level deck, which is effectively going to become a balcony for that bedrooms up there. Because it won't get used very often, because it helps out the neighbors, and because it will also allow more natural light into the living spaces below by doing that. So
I think that's a great move. I think giving the roof a little more variation and a steeper pitch, and making those bedrooms upstairs, they can have a high peak ceiling,
right,
and then their spring point can be lower, and then you can make the ceiling height on the first floor higher. You can do something interesting like panel the ceiling, and it can imagine if have you guys ever been out to Stinson Beach at Seadrift, where there's some of those houses where you can actually see all the way through from the front door out to the water? There would be something very beautiful about opening that front door and seeing all the way through the home out to the garden and the pool.
Yeah.
So that would be my suggestion. And just, you don't have to go up to 30 feet, but if you go to 30 feet, it's a peak. It's not a plane.
Right.
At 30 feet. It's not a box up at 30 feet.
Yeah.
So,
and one additional comment on Joey's point. If you describe that deck as more of a balcony, do you need to have a stair down at all?
Again, the whole thought there was just for egress. Want to have two means of getting off of that level to the grade, basically.
there was an approval, I think, was it 2001, where that was allowed specifically as a second means of egress. It's in the notes. But it really should be minimal.
Yeah,
There's not a lot of socializing up there.
Correct. I agree. Yeah.
So, are you finished, Joey?
Yes.
Right. Well, I'm glad Joey went before me. So, this house, it's not necessarily the most attractive house in Ross. And raising it up, I'm fully supportive of raising things out of the floodplain. I think anytime it's done, it should be passed through underneath to help out. But if you're basically saying, and if I understand you correctly, Mr. Rogers, that the whole first floor is going to have to be redone, and now you're thinking that actually the bedrooms are going to be moved as well, and so the whole second floor is going to be redone also, or basically down to studs, and then redo the rooms to get more bedrooms up there and more living area down on the ground floor, correct?
Correct.
And so if you're doing all that, and it's obviously a huge project, then I do agree with Joey that the opportunity should be used to try to make it a bit more attractive, especially from the street side. And I think that deck becomes much smaller if it even exists at all. But more importantly, having a front door facing out on the street, making it look nicer from the street. Originally my comments and thoughts were about the windows. It would look nicer if they matched the lower floor and the upper floor. But if you're doing all that you're doing anyway, you're almost doing just a new house that's out of the floodplain. Which is great. And I hope that you and your clients end up with something that they love, and I think it can be done without adding much more expense, but just, as Joey was saying, make it much more attractive and homey feeling from the front yard.
Yeah.
Which is different, I know, than the project that you all embarked upon, but it seems some of these things take a life on their own, and not because we're dictating it, but because you and your clients have decided, well, the first floor can't stay anyway because we have to raise it up. And the second floor, we want to change all the walls because we want to make it bedrooms instead of living area. we want to raise the ceiling on the ground floor to make it living area. I think they're all great ideas and great changes. But if you're doing that, let's make the outside of the house a little better looking.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, and it's been something of an incremental scope creep, especially given that the project started out as a kitchen remodel.
Yeah.
That is a big change.
So I appreciate what you're saying, and obviously I appreciate the perspective, and I need to circle back to my clients, to Libby and Adam, and make some of these suggestions and see where that goes. So.
Okay, well, in that case, I mean, my overall recommendation would be that we sort of need to see it again, because it sounds like there are going to be a bunch of changes that you're making, whether it's just the windows or the deck or rearranging the front of the house or the roof line. It seems like a lot of things are in flux. So we should probably see it again before we can make a recommendation to the town council.
Okay.
But Mark and Joey, do you have the same opinion or a different one for a final recommendation?
No, I concur. I feel stupid for going first. I didn't, it was the scope creep, even crept up on me. I concur across the board. I mean, I think if Mr. Rogers, if you can, kind of convince your clients to take the leap, there are a lot of things that you could end up doing. And I think that, Joey and Mark have articulated those, but I think we would probably want to see it again.
Got it.
Unless those changes really don't occur and that, the scope is much more locked down. But it sounds like there's opportunities there to expand it and probably see it again.
Well, it sounds like maybe I can get Joey's help in advocating for some of these.
Well,
with my point.
I also think you should really think about resale value in terms of what people want.
Right.
And as people age, they don't want, even, I've had experience with family members that are all of a sudden in a wheelchair,
Right.
and, they can't get into the house.
Right.
They can't get to the backyard. So it's something to think about. They have a wonderful opportunity here to do it right and really increase the value of this home.
Yeah.
And I think, if they could swing it, that would be really smart thing to do.
Yep. Got it. Do you know when the next meeting is that I could present revised plans?
Probably 4 weeks.
That's a question for Matthew.
Yes, I'm just checking the date right now. And let's see. Looks like August 17th.
Wow.
There's nothing in July?
No, we have a July, I think.
Yes.
July 21st.
If July is possible, that would be better for us.
Yeah, well, we meet every month.
Okay.
So
it feels like every 2 weeks right now.
Well, right now, because we had a backlog because of the whole coronavirus.
COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would encourage you not to let the date, if the 21st seems reasonable in July, but this is an important project as one of the streets in town, and it's a big project. So we'd want to make sure we made sure we saw it again.
Yeah.
Whatever works for.
Yeah, we definitely would like to see this again and work with you.
Sounds great.
Okay, well,
Thanks, Andy.
thank you for your time and your presentation, and we'll now move on to the next item.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Bye-bye. Have a good evening.
Okay, before we get to the approval of minutes, there's time for communications. Are there some communications you have for us?
I don't have too much to add. Just that we have 2 planning projects going to council later this week. I'm just pulling up the council agenda right now to make sure I get them correct. So this Thursday at 6 o'clock will be a council meeting, and we've got 43 Laurel Grove and 9 Skyland that this group has previously seen. they'll now be going in front of council for action. Another planning related project that's going out there is an emergency order to allow retail and dining in the public way. So that's something that the mayor and the town manager signed last week, which now allows any businesses in downtown Ross to make use of the sidewalk or the street in order to do business while social distancing. And so right now, Trattoria Fresco and Tony Tutto have taken advantage of that. It's basically a limited term encroachment permit that they can utilize. And then if it's successful and if there are no impacts, they can continue that onward. If we are to have permanent sidewalk dining as something that we allow downtown, it might be something that we'd want to get the ADR group's input on as far as how the design of those places look. I know that there was a use permit associated with Tony Tutto that it did approve sidewalk seating. But if there were other restaurants that either moved in or ones that are existing wanted to incorporate it, we'd probably be looking to this group for feedback on what design aspects you'd like to see on sidewalk dining or the use of parklets, which is conversion of a parking space into public space. And then also I mentioned at the last meeting that we are going to be putting out a call for applications for the ADR group. I was able to dig up the materials for that, and so modified them and updated them. We'll probably have the call for applications go out with a deadline of July 29th. And then it would be the August council meeting that they would decide on appointments. And again, I would encourage our incumbent members to reapply if you so choose. And that's all the reports I have.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Matthew, do you have anything, or can I move on to the approval of minutes?
I have no reports. Thank you.
Okay. So we have the May 21 and June 4th minutes. I read over both of them. Do either of you have any problems with those 2 minutes? I'm fine with both of them.
My one comment about them was that I was frustrated, for example, with that pool application on Ivy Drive, that it just said the ADR did not support it, but it did not give our specific recommendations, which we used to have in the minutes. Because what I wanted to say to them, for example, was like, look at the minutes. This is what we said to do, and you've only moved it 2 feet. Or I went back to the minutes to have a little look and see what, I just want to make sure that's what we said. And it was very general. I wish there had been a little more detailed reporting on what we actually said.
If I can just speak to that briefly, Chair Krishna. Something that we decided, Matthew and I basically, as we're doing these recorded meetings, we figured we could reduce the amount of staff resources that go into writing detailed action minutes because you can just refer back to the recording. But I do understand the intent of having minutes with action items that you can point to. So I can probably put this on an agenda that we can kind of flesh out more how it should look, how the way that we record minutes. But other design review groups that I've worked with in the past, basically the chair at the end summarizes kind of a list of action items, either things that are must-haves with the design and things that are considers. And then if the project comes back in front, they can describe how they considered certain things or how they implemented other things. When it works for moving on to council, then the council knows that they were told either this must be incorporated or this should be considered and addressed in this project. So I think that's something that we can put on the next agenda for the ADR group to kind of just flesh out how that would look.
I think that's actually a good idea to have that and have that written down as well. Just because, and even I think before the minutes were maybe too thorough in the recounting of what we said. Yeah. And maybe now we've swung the other way. So having maybe a couple paragraphs, and maybe it would be helpful, as you suggested, for the current AGR chair to give those should do and should consider recommendations so that both us and, more importantly, the town council has something that they can read, because we're not sure if they're going to spend the hour watching the meeting. Or in this case, 2 hours.
Absolutely. They need to have the bullet points of what we said were our recommendations. Like tonight, we had some pretty specific ideas about that pool, and that needs to be in the minutes so that the town council can see that.
Heard.
Okay. So I understand and agree with your overall comments on the minutes, but as far as what is there in the summary, are we good accepting those and passing them on?
Is there any way to go back and add a little more detail? I'm just thinking of like the historical report. You know, we are being, this is a historical record of what was said. Is there any way to go back and just say what we said the first time, what we said the second time?
Yeah, we can not approve the draft minutes for June 4th tonight, and we'll bring them back next time with more detail.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I'm sorry to add that work, but I actually think for just procedural and legal reasons, we need to have a little more detail in those.
I think we can do that via email too. I mean, I think we can expedite the approval. We don't need to wait to the next meeting to approve them if in
Sure.
fact you guys want to get earlier approval.
Yeah,
We can
good
do that,
idea.
yeah. I think we can.
Yeah, and either way, I mean, if it does go to the council before the ADR next meets, then the council would just see draft minutes. So we can
Okay.
send them around, and you can let me know if the draft minutes look accurate to you, and then
Okay.
we'll really approve them at the next meeting.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
a good idea. As far as the May 21 minutes, I recommend we approve them.
Yeah.
True.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, great. That's all of the minutes. And now I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks
Good night.
for organizing. And thanks,
Sure.
Patrick and Matthew.
Thanks, Patrick Macchio. Thank you again, Mr. and Mrs. Ching.
Yes, thank you so much. Thanks for your work. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Yes.